Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Akafa from John Samuel Estate. We've had a very long day today. I've got out of my consultation advice. Akafa from John Samuel Estate. We've had a very long day today. I've got out of my consultation advice today. I had two clients that came in regards to tenancy agreements, and I just thought it would be a good idea to go back to my book and also just share the chapter where I highlighted the importance of having the properly worded tenancy agreement. And the title of my book is Why Landlords and Tenants Fall Out of Love. I'm just going to start by reading chapter 3, where I highlighted the importance of tenancy agreements, titled The Marriage Certificate. For any relationship to succeed, there needs to be a contract stating each roles and responsibilities. The tenancy agreement is a very important legal document and needs to be understood by the parties signing the agreement. When there is an agreement, there is an understanding before a promise is made. This prevents the promise or the agreement being broken. Many times, the reason why it gets broken is that both parties are unaware of or do not have a clear understanding of the responsibilities or the legal terms that are included in the tenancy. The next paragraph. The tenancy agreement can either be written or oral in the UK. We have tenancy agreements for properties privately rented. So a tenancy agreement is a contract between a landlord and a tenant. It also sets out the legal terms and conditions of your tenancy. However, these days, most agreements are written because that can be used as evidence when something is written down. The next paragraph. A tenancy can either be fixed to term 1, which runs from a set period, or can be periodic, which can be a running contract. It can be renewed week by week or month by month. Both of you, that is the landlord and the tenant, have set rights and responsibilities. Whether or not you have a tenancy agreement, you still both have rights and responsibilities. We are going to outline the types of tenancy agreement in the next paragraph. The first one is the assured short-term tenancy, which is called the AST. I'm sure as a tenant or as a landlord, you are already aware of this type of tenancy, but some ASTs have not been worded properly. So I believe this chapter would help you understand the information that is mandatory, the needs to be in-depth in the tenancy. The AST, which is the assured short-term tenancy, which is the most common form of tenancy. Most tenancies are automatically this type of tenancy. A tenancy can be an AST if all of the following points applies. Number 1, the property you rent is private. Secondly, your tenancy started on or before the 15th of January 1989. Number 3, the property is your main accommodation. And number 4, your landlord doesn't live in the property. A tenancy can't be regarded as an AST when it began or was agreed before the 15th of January 1989. The rent is more than $100,000 a year, or if the rent is less than £250 a year, which is less than £1,000 in London. It's a business tenancy or a tenancy of licensed premises. And finally, also if the property is a holiday let or your landlord lives in the property, you do not require an AST. For instance, if you rent directly from the council, you do not need an AST because it's a council property. Like I mentioned, ASTs are for privately rented properties. The tenancy agreement is a document that has all the agreements that needs to be made before the contract or the tenancy commences. Technically, the tenancy starting between January 15, 1989 and February 27, 1989 may be assured. There is increased protection from eviction with this type of agreements. Tenancy starting before January 15, 1989 may be regulated and have increased protection from eviction and the ability to apply for a fair rate. So I'm sure the question in your mind is, what should be in a tenancy agreement? What should be included? That is the question landlords and tenants usually ask. As I mentioned earlier, the assured short tenancy agreement is very important and should include all the agreements, rights, responsibility, rates. Everything should be included in the tenancy agreement. Also, the things that should be included are the names of all the people involved, whether it's a joint tenancy, the landlord's name should be on the tenancy agreement, the rental price, and how it's being paid. If you'd like it paid by direct debit, banks, transfer, you have to explain in detail how you want the rent to be paid. It needs to be included in the tenancy agreement. I have highlighted this in bold italic. If the rent will be revealed, which I believe we discussed in my previous chapter, it has to include when it's going to be revealed, the deposit amount, and how it will be protected, that is the deposit scheme. The property address, which property you are about to rent, the start and end of the tenancy. Any tenant or landlord's obligation like the repairs, your responsibility rights, an outline of the bills you're responsible for, or if it's an exclusive bill contract. It should also include information on who's responsible for minor repairs and dues that the landlord is legally responsible for, which is explained in a couple of chapters later. Whether the property can be let to someone or not, or which is sublet. Whether the tenancy can be ended early or what notice you need to give if you decide to end the tenancy. Oftentimes, I've had cases where people change jobs. In this instance, the landlord needs proper notice of these things, and the notice period has to be included in the tenancy agreement. Also, the terms of the tenancy must be fair and comply with the law. I must stress on this again. The terms of the tenancy must be fair and comply with the law. The tenancy agreement can't have anything that's directly discriminatory. For example, you can't have a tenancy saying you do not allow gay couples, you only allow women, or you don't allow men. You cannot discriminate, and the tenancy agreement cannot include such choice of words. You can also seek the advice of Citizens Advice Bureau, and they would be in a position to help you further with the right wording to use. You have to prevent discrimination. You can't be discriminated against or harassed by your landlords. Landlords shouldn't harass tenants by discriminating on the grounds of age or gender, like saying, I want tenants just between the ages of 21 and 35. The tenancy shouldn't include such words. You shouldn't discriminate against gender, sexual orientation, religious belief, race, pregnancy, etc. Also, some of the problems that arise in tenancy agreements are changes to tenancy agreements. Both you and your tenants must agree to change the terms. Both parties have to agree. I must say this again. Both parties have to agree. Just like when you look at a marriage, for a divorce to come into effect, both parties have to agree. They both have to sign the divorce papers to have that happen. My next paragraph. Sometimes we do have tenancy agreements that don't work out. Either you have the wrong tenants in the properties, or tenant has to relocate, as I said previously, or there's been a lot of misconception. The landlord decides to move in, or the landlord decides to sell. There has to be some laws and guidelines you need to follow to end the tenancy agreement. Your tenancy agreement should say how much notice you need to give your landlord before you leave the property. It needs to be in the contract. There has to be a break clause in your tenancy agreement if your landlord agrees to end the tenancy early. A break clause is the procedure for ending your tenancy. You can also leave your tenancy after giving your notice, whether it is fixed term or not. Now we're going to talk about various types, other types of tenancies which also have the license. Another type of tenancy that isn't common is licenses. You may live in the property and have extra tenants. The property is licensed if you lodge like this. I have situations where landlords live in the house and does rent part of the property. In this case, you do not require an ASC. What you need is a license, and the person who rents the property is regarded as a lodger, and then a rate applies. I have had questions from tenants or landlords regarding this. I have a friend of mine renting a property with an AST type of agreement, but the landlords live in the property with him. He should have been provided with a license agreement and not AST. Usually, licenses have less protection from eviction with this type of agreement as opposed to when you go on an AST. Also, I explained in details the license agreements. If your license automatically runs out after a specific date and you want to end the agreement, you should let your landlord know this before your license runs out. This is very, very important. In situations where landlord wants to end your tenancy, what do? The landlord must give you a notice and a way, including certain information and warnings. This depends on the type of tenancy agreement and the terms. In some situations, your landlord takes back the property without giving any reason. For an AST agreement, they must supply the tenants with prescribed information, which must include where they protected your deposit with any of the schemes. They must have given you 2 months written notice that they want the property back, notice to quit, and giving you dates you must leave. The date you must leave is at least 6 months after your original tenancy began, the one you had on first moving in. For instance, you have a periodic tenancy, you have a fixed term tenancy, or your landlord isn't asking you to leave before the end of the fixed term. I also I highlighted a few examples of some of the real life stories I've had to deal with as a tenant, as a landlord, or as a professional. I'm just going to go through a few of them rather than going through all of them. Few examples I cited was recently I went to see an elderly woman from the eastern part of London, and I wondered why she didn't call a local agent. She wanted my help on the sale of her property. My first question to her was why she wanted to sell after having the property for so many years, and she explained to me in detail how she has had bad experiences with tenants and agents. She brought out a box of documents which had all the tenancy agreement she had always signed with her previous tenants and the agents. I was very shocked that none of the agreements included the landlord's right or responsibility, neither did it have the tenant's right or responsibility. This explains why she has always had to replace everything in the house, like the light bulbs, toilet seats, fix the dishwasher even when the problem was caused by the tenants. A further shock was when she revealed that she had an agent manage the property and it was the same issue, she had to pay for everything. All I can see here is a lack of knowledge, which can be very costly, and what was the case with the elderly women. I'm just going to cite one more example, which is the final one. A friend of mine told me an interesting story about a landlord who felt it was his right to enter the property without any previous notice. My friend complained about this to him on many occasions, but by law, he wasn't authorized to come in and go in as he wished. My friend believed this was true until I asked her to review our contract to see if this was mentioned at all. So you see the importance of having the proper tenancy agreements, and I've said to my clients as well, if you have a tenancy agreement that is less than 8 pages, then you need to have your tenancy agreement looked at properly by a proper agent or by a solicitor. That is all for today. If you have any other questions in regards to the private rental sector, please do give me a call on 0203-601-4664, or our website is www.johnsamuelestates.co.uk. Our email is info@johnsamuelestate.co.uk. Thank you very much and have a good day. Stephanie Okafor.